The morning mist clung to the valley floor like a whispered secret, and Marcus Hayes stood on the wraparound porch of his weathered farmhouse, watching the sun paint gold across the rolling hills of Cedar Creek, Montana. 38 years old, and he'd spent the last 15 of them in solitude on this 100-acre spread, finding peace in the rhythm of ranch work and the company of his 2 border collies, Sage and Timber. His coffee had gone cold in the ceramic mug, one of the few remaining pieces from his grandmother's kitchen set, but Marcus barely noticed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The September air carried the scent of dying leaves and the promise of an early frost, reminding him that winter preparations would begin soon. Another season alone, another year of conversations limited to his dogs, the occasional phone call with his sister in Billings, and brief exchanges with neighbors during supply runs to town. Sage's sharp bark, cut through his morning contemplation, followed immediately by Timber's deeper woof. Both dogs had abandoned their usual spots on the porch steps and were racing toward the main gate, their tails high with excitement rather than alarm. Marcus set down his mug and stepped off the porch, his worn boots crunching on the gravel path that wound between the house and the barn. "What's got you two all worked up?" He called to the dogs, but they were already at the fence line, circling something with curious whines and playful yips. As Marcus approached, squinting against the morning sun that streamed through the maple trees lining his property, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, curled up in the old wooden wagon he'd left near the gate, a wagon he'd been meaning to repair for months, was the most unexpected sight he'd witnessed in all his years of ranch living. A woman, probably in her late 20s, lay sleeping with her arms wrapped protectively around 2 small children. Twin girls, by the look of them, couldn't be more than 4 years old, with matching auburn curls that caught the morning light like spun copper. But it wasn't just the presence of these unexpected visitors that made Marcus rub his eyes to ensure he wasn't dreaming. Sitting upright at the foot of the wagon, as dignified as a butler at a formal dinner, was a pig. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," Marcus replied, his heart already softening toward these unexpected visitors. "Wellington certainly looks like he has excellent manners." As if understanding the compliment, Wellington stood and executed what could only be described as a slight bow, his bow tie bobbing with the movement. Isabella giggled, the first sound of joy Marcus had heard from any of them. "We should be going," Elena said, though she made no move to rise from the wagon. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept properly in days, perhaps weeks. "Where exactly are you headed?" Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer would be vague. Elena's eyes darted away from his. "West. Just west." The non-answer confirmed Marcus's suspicions. These weren't travelers with a destination. They were people running from something. The protective way Elena held her daughters, the wariness in their young eyes, the fact that they were sleeping in wagons with a pig for a companion, all of it painted a picture of desperation that Marcus recognized from his years volunteering at the Veteran Center. "Tell you what," Marcus said, straightening and settling his hat back on his head. "It's going to be a scorcher today, and you folks look like you could use some breakfast and a chance to wash up. My housekeeper quit 3 months ago, and this place is falling apart without proper care." Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. A woman who had learned to be suspicious of kindness from strangers. "We don't accept charity, Mr. Hayes." "Good thing I'm not offering any," Marcus replied easily. "I'm offering work. Temporary help in exchange for room and board. I've got a guest cabin that's been sitting empty, and frankly, I could use someone to help organize the chaos that passes for my kitchen." Sophia looked up at her mother with hopeful eyes. "Mama, I'm hungry." The simple statement from her daughter seemed to deflate some of Elena's resistance. Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out across her expressive face, pride warring with practical necessity, fear battling with exhaustion. "Wellington would need a place to stay too," Isabella said seriously. "He doesn't like to be separated from us." Marcus glanced at the pig, who was now preening his bow tie with surprising dexterity. "Well, I suppose I could clear out a section of the barn, long as Wellington doesn't mind sharing space with my horses." "He's very social," Sophia assured him. "Grammy always said he was part diplomat." "A diplomatic pig and a bow tie," Marcus mused. "Can't say I've ever had one of those on the ranch before." Elena studied his face intently, searching for signs of deception or ulterior motives. Marcus kept his expression open and patient, understanding that trust would have to be earned rather than given. "Just temporary," she said finally, "until we can get back on our feet." "Understood," Marcus agreed, though something in his chest hoped it might be longer than that. The guest cabin hadn't been used in over 2 years, not since Marcus's sister had visited with her family during a particularly difficult period in her marriage. As he led Elena and the twins across the yard, Wellington trotting behind them with surprising dignity, Marcus mentally cataloged everything that would need attention before the space was habitable. "It's not much," he warned, producing a key from the ring on his belt. "But it's clean and dry, and the wood stove heats it pretty well." The cabin was a single large room with a kitchenette along one wall, a small bathroom tucked into the corner, and enough space for 2 twin beds and a couch that had seen better days. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out over the pasture where Marcus's horses grazed peacefully. Sophia and Isabella immediately ran to the windows, pressing their faces against the glass. "Horses!" Isabella exclaimed. "Mama, look at all the horses!" Elena moved more cautiously through the space, her trained eye assessing exits, sight lines, and potential problems. Old habits, Marcus realized, from someone who had learned to always have an escape plan. "The lock works," Marcus said quietly, understanding her concern. "And I'll make sure you have a spare key. Your privacy is your own." Some of the tension left Elena's shoulders. "Thank you. We'll try not to be any trouble." Wellington had stationed himself near the door, apparently appointing himself as guardian of the threshold. The pig's presence was oddly comforting, Marcus noted. There was something almost regal about the way he carried himself, bow tie and all. "There's a small corral behind the barn where Wellington can exercise," Marcus offered. "It's got good shade and a water trough that I keep clean for the horses." "He'd like that," Elena said, and for the first time since he'd found them, Marcus saw a genuine smile cross her face. "He's very particular about cleanliness." As if to prove the point, Wellington began inspecting the cabin's corners, snorting softly at dust bunnies and looking disapproving of a spider web near the window. "Grammy taught him standards," Sophia explained seriously. "She said a gentleman always maintains proper hygiene." Marcus found himself increasingly charmed by these children who spoke with such gravity about their pig's social etiquette. "Your grandmother sounds like she was quite a character." "She was the best person in the whole world," Isabella said with the absolute certainty of childhood. "She taught Wellington to dance and everything." "Dance?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. Elena's cheeks colored slightly. "It's really more of a spin and bow combination." Grammy was creative in her approach to pet training. The image of the dignified pig performing dance moves brought the first genuine laugh Marcus had felt in months. Wellington, perhaps sensing he was being discussed, executed another small bow, his bow tie catching the afternoon light. "I'd be honored to see that performance sometime," Marcus said solemnly, treating the matter with the gravity it clearly deserved to the twins. Over the next few hours, Marcus found himself drawn into the gentle chaos of helping the small family settle in. Elena proved to be efficient and organized, quickly arranging their few belongings. Everything they owned apparently fit into 2 worn duffel bags and a backpack covered in cartoon characters that had seen better days. The twins, once they overcame their initial shyness, revealed themselves to be intelligent and surprisingly well-behaved children. They helped their mother unpack with serious concentration, each item placed with careful consideration. Wellington supervised the entire process from his position near the door, occasionally offering commentary in the form of soft grunts or the rustling of his bow tie. Marcus noticed that the pig never strayed far from the children, always positioning himself where he could keep an eye on both girls simultaneously. "He's very protective," Elena explained, noticing Marcus's observation. "He's been with them since they were babies." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "My grandmother left him to them when she passed last year." "Must have been quite a woman to train a pig like that," Marcus said, genuinely impressed by Wellington's obvious intelligence and devotion. "She raised me after my parents died," Elena said softly, her hands stilling on the small pile of children's clothes she was organizing. "Taught me that family isn't always blood, and that love comes in many forms." The words carried weight, and Marcus sensed there was much more to Elena's story. But he also recognized someone who wasn't ready to share painful details, so he simply nodded and continued helping them settle in. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found excuses to linger around the cabin, ostensibly checking on repairs that needed doing, but really just enjoying the unfamiliar sounds of voices and laughter that now filled his quiet ranch. Sophia and Isabella had discovered his barn cats and were delighting in trying to coax the shy creatures out of hiding with Wellington's help. "Mr. Hayes," Sophia called from where she sat cross-legged in the dirt, a orange tabby cat finally allowing her to pet its head. "Do your kitties have names?" "Some do," Marcus admitted, walking over to join them. "That one you're petting is Marmalade. The black and white one hiding behind the hay bale is Patches. And the gray one watching us from the loft is Smokey." "They're beautiful," Isabella breathed, her eyes wide with wonder as another cat emerged from the shadows. Marcus watched the twins interact with his animals, noting their gentle hands and patient movements. These children had been taught to respect living creatures, another mark in favor of their upbringing despite whatever circumstances had brought them here. Wellington, not to be outdone by the cats, had somehow managed to charm Marcus's horses. The pigs stood at the pasture fence, and Marcus's usually skittish mare, Rosie, was actually nuzzling the pig's head with apparent affection. "I've never seen anything like that," Marcus admitted to Elena, who was watching the interspecies friendship with amusement. "Wellington has always had a way with other animals," she said. "Grammy used to say he was an old soul in a pig's body." The warmth in her voice when she spoke of her grandmother suggested a deep love and an equally deep loss. Marcus understood that kind of grief, the way it could hollow you out and send you searching for something to fill the empty spaces. As evening approached, Marcus reluctantly prepared to give the family space to settle in properly. But before he could take his leave, Sophia appeared at his elbow with a serious expression. "Mr. Hayes, Wellington wants to know if you have proper dinner protocols." Marcus blinked, unsure how to respond to such a formal question from a 4-year-old. "Dinner protocols? He's very particular about meal times," Isabella explained helpfully. "Grammy taught him that civilized beings maintain regular dining schedules." Elena looked mortified. "Girls, you can't expect Mr. Hayes to—" "Actually," Marcus interrupted, an idea forming. "I was about to start dinner myself. Nothing fancy, just beef stew and cornbread. But I always make too much for one person." The hopeful looks on the twins' faces were impossible to resist, and even Elena seemed to waver in her automatic refusal of help. "Wellington would be very pleased to join a proper dinner," Sophia said diplomatically. "He doesn't like eating alone." Marcus had to admire the children's negotiating skills, using their pig as a way to make acceptance of his invitation seem like a favor to Wellington rather than charity to them. "Well, we can't disappoint Wellington," Marcus said seriously. "A gentleman pig deserves a proper dinner invitation." Elena's resistance finally crumbled, and she nodded gratefully. "That would be very kind. Is there anything we can help with?" "Sophia and Isabella can help me set the table," Marcus said. "And Wellington can supervise to make sure we maintain proper standards." The twins giggled at this suggestion, and Wellington preened as if he understood his important role in the evening's proceedings. Marcus's kitchen hadn't hosted guests in over 3 years, but as he watched Elena move efficiently around the space, chopping vegetables while the twins carefully arranged silverware under Wellington's watchful eye, the room felt more alive than it had in recent memory. "Mama makes the best cornbread in Texas," Sophia announced proudly. "We're not in Texas anymore, sweetheart," Elena said gently, though Marcus caught the slight tension in her voice at the geographical reference. "Where are we now?" Isabella asked innocently. "Montana," Marcus answered when Elena hesitated. "Cedar Creek, Montana. Big sky country." Sophia considered this information seriously. "Is it safe in Montana, Mr. Hayes?" The question, asked with such earnestness by such a young child, made Marcus's chest tight. "It's safe here on the ranch," he said firmly. "Very safe." Elena met his eyes over the children's heads, gratitude and something else, hope, maybe, flickering in her expression. Dinner was a surprisingly comfortable affair. The twins chattered about everything from their favorite colors to Wellington's preference for classical music, while the pig himself sat in a corner of the kitchen, his bow tie slightly askew but his dignity intact. Marcus found himself laughing more than he had in months, charmed by the children's observations and touched by Elena's quiet grace as she guided their conversation and gently corrected their table manners. Wellington learned to appreciate Beethoven from Grammy, Isabella explained seriously as they finished their stew. She said good music was essential for proper development. Your grandmother sounds like she was quite an educator, Marcus observed. She was a music teacher, Elena said softly, taught piano and voice lessons in her home for 40 years. She believed that beauty and culture could civilize anyone, even pigs. The love and loss in her voice was palpable, and Marcus understood that this woman was grieving not just the loss of her grandmother, but everything that loss had cost her and her children. As they cleaned up after dinner, with the twins carefully washing dishes while Wellington supervised from his position by the back door, Marcus found himself reluctant to end the evening. His house felt warmer and more alive with their presence, filled with the kind of energy he hadn't realized he'd been missing. Tomorrow, if you're up for it, I could show you around the ranch properly, Marcus offered as Elena gathered her daughters for the walk back to the cabin. There's a lot to see, and Wellington might enjoy meeting the other animals. Can we see where the horses sleep? Sophia asked eagerly. And maybe learn their names? Isabella added. All 23 of them, Marcus confirmed, smiling at their enthusiasm. Elena's eyes widened. 23 horses? I run a therapeutic riding program for veterans and special needs kids, Marcus explained. Though it's been on hold since my assistant moved to Colorado. The information seemed to shift something in Elena's perception of him, and Marcus saw her take in details about his home with new understanding. The accessibility ramps, the specialized equipment in the barn, the careful organization that spoke of someone who regularly worked with people who needed structure and patience. That's wonderful work, she said quietly. It helps, Marcus said simply, not elaborating on how much the program had helped him process his own demons as much as it helped his participants. As they walked back to the cabin under a canopy of stars that seemed impossibly bright after the urban glow Elena and the twins were clearly accustomed to, Wellington trotted importantly between the children, his bow tie slightly crooked but his dignity undiminished. The stars are so bright here, Elena murmured, her voice filled with wonder. Light pollution is minimal out here, Marcus explained. On clear nights, you can see the Milky Way. Sophia and Isabella tilted their heads back, trying to take in the vast expanse of sparkling darkness above them. It's like Grammy's music box, Isabella whispered. All sparkly and magical. At the cabin door, Marcus hesitated, reluctant to break the spell of the evening, but knowing the family needed rest and privacy. Thank you, Elena said simply, but the words carried the weight of profound gratitude. For everything. For not turning us away. For dinner. For making the girls feel welcome. Thank you for accepting my invitation, Marcus replied. This old ranch hasn't felt this alive in years. As he walked back to his house, Marcus could hear Elena's gentle voice reading a bedtime story to her daughters, the sound drifting through the cabin's open windows along with Wellington's soft, contented grunts. For the first time in 15 years, Marcus Hayes fell asleep to the sound of other people's voices, and his dreams were filled not with the nightmares that usually haunted his sleep, but with images of auburn-haired children laughing, and a pig in a bow tie who somehow managed to make everything feel right with the world. But even in his contentment, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Elena's guarded moments and the children's casual references to mean men suggested that this peaceful interlude was temporary. Whatever had brought this small family to his ranch, it wasn't over. And as he drifted off to sleep, Marcus found himself hoping that when trouble eventually came calling, because his instincts told him it would, he would be strong enough and smart enough to protect the unexpected gift that had literally rolled into his life in an old wooden wagon. The first week at Cedar Creek Ranch passed like a gentle dream that Elena was afraid to trust. Each morning brought the sound of Marcus's voice calling good morning to his horses, followed by the rhythmic clang of tools in the barn as he went about his daily routines. The twins had adapted to ranch life with the remarkable resilience of children, rising early to help feed Wellington, and racing outside to greet the barn cats before breakfast. Elena found herself drawn into the peaceful rhythm of ranch work, discovering that physical labor helped quiet the constant anxiety that had become her unwanted companion over the past months. Marcus had been true to his word about needing help. The main house bore the unmistakable signs of a bachelor's neglect, with dust-coating surfaces and kitchen cabinets that hadn't been properly organized in what appeared to be months. But it was more than just housework that occupied her days. Marcus had a way of including her in ranch decisions that made her feel valued, rather than pitied. He asked her opinion on everything from the best placement for new fencing to her thoughts on reorganizing the feed storage system in the barn. "You've got a good eye for efficiency," he told her one afternoon as they worked together to repair a section of the horse corral that had been damaged in a recent storm. "Take someone with organizational skills to see how things could work better." Elena felt a flush of pride at the compliment. It had been so long since anyone had valued her input, treated her thoughts as worthy of consideration. In her previous life, before everything had gone wrong, she had managed the office for her grandmother's music school, keeping track of lesson schedules, coordinating recitals, and handling the countless details that kept the small business running smoothly. The twins thrived in the open space of the ranch, their laughter echoing across the pastures as they discovered new adventures daily. Sophia had appointed herself Wellington's official exercise coordinator, creating elaborate obstacle courses using hay bales and buckets that the pig navigated with surprising grace and obvious enjoyment. Isabella, meanwhile, had developed a special bond with Marcus's gentlest mare, a aging sorrel named Buttercup, who seemed to sense the child's need for quiet comfort. Marcus often found Isabella sitting in the pasture, speaking in soft whispers to the horse, while Wellington stood guard nearby, his bow tie perfectly straight as always. "She's got natural horsemanship instincts," Marcus observed to Elena one evening, as they watched Isabella brush Buttercup's coat with careful strokes. "The mare's been standoffish with most people since I rescued her from a neglect situation 2 years ago." Elena's heart clenched as she watched her daughter's gentle interaction with the damaged animal. Both had learned to be wary of touch, to flinch from sudden movements, to find safety in quiet corners where they couldn't be easily cornered. "Isabella's always been drawn to hurt things," Elena said softly. "She spent hours with Wellington when he was just a piglet, and my grandmother was nursing him back to health. He'd been abandoned in a barn fire, traumatized and refusing to eat." Marcus glanced at her with new understanding. "That's how Wellington came to your family?" Elena nodded, her hands busy with mending a bridle that had seen better days. "Grammy said healing happens best when broken things take care of each other. She never explained what she meant, but watching Isabella with your horse, I think I understand now." The observation hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken recognition of their own wounds and the careful healing that was taking place in the quiet spaces of their shared days. Wellington had become something of a ranch celebrity, his dignified presence and impeccable manners earning him respect from both the horses and the barn cats. Marcus's border collies, Sage and Timber, had initially been confused by the pig's presence but now treated him as an honorary member of their pack, often including him in their evening patrols of the property. "Never seen anything like it," Marcus admitted to Elena as they watched Wellington lead the dogs in a dignified inspection of the fence line, his bow tie catching the late afternoon sun. "That pig's got more leadership skills than some people I've known." Elena smiled, remembering her grandmother's stories about Wellington's early days. "Grammy always said he was special. She trained him like she would train a child, with patience and consistency and the absolute belief that he was capable of greatness." The memory brought both warmth and pain, as memories of her grandmother always did. Margaret Reeves had been the kind of woman who saw potential everywhere and refused to accept that anyone or anything was beyond redemption. She had raised Elena with that same unwavering faith, teaching her that dignity and grace were choices that could be made regardless of circumstances. It was that training that helped Elena navigate the growing complexity of her feelings about Marcus Hayes. She had learned to be suspicious of kindness from men, to question motives and look for hidden agendas. But Marcus's behavior remained consistently generous without expectation, helpful without hovering, respectful of her space while making it clear that she and the twins were welcome to stay as long as they needed. He was different from anyone she'd known, comfortable in his own skin in a way that suggested hard-won peace rather than easy privilege. Elena found herself watching him work with his horses, noting the patience he showed with the more difficult animals and the quiet authority that never relied on force or intimidation. "Mr. Marcus," Sophia called one afternoon as she and Isabella played in the barn loft while Elena organized feed supplies below. Wellington wants to know if you have any horses that need dancing lessons. Marcus paused in his work shoeing Buttercup, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Dancing lessons? Wellington's an excellent dance instructor, Isabella added seriously. Grammy said he had natural rhythm. Elena felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Girls, I'm sure Mr. Hayes doesn't need. Actually, Marcus interrupted, his eyes twinkling with amusement, I'd be honored to see Wellington's teaching methods. Some of these horses could use lessons in grace. The twins giggled and scampered down from the loft, immediately beginning preparations for what they clearly considered a formal demonstration. Sophia arranged hay bales in a semicircle while Isabella fetched Wellington from his afternoon nap in the shade. Wellington emerged from his rest with dignity and tact, bow tie slightly rumpled but quickly straightened with a shake of his head. He surveyed the assembled audience. Marcus, Elena, the twins, and several horses who had wandered close to the barn to investigate the commotion, with the air of a performer assessing his stage. Grammy taught him to the Blue Danube, Sophia announced importantly. But he also knows the Tennessee Waltz. Elena watched in amazement as Wellington positioned himself in the center of the improvised performance space and, at some signal only the twins understood, began a surprisingly graceful series of movements that could indeed be described as dancing. The pig stepped and turned with deliberate precision, his bow tie bobbing in rhythm to music only he could hear. Marcus watched in fascination as Wellington executed a series of spins followed by the formal bow that had become his signature move. The horses seemed equally entranced, several of them moving closer to the fence to get a better view of the unusual performance. That's remarkable, Marcus said sincerely, applauding as Wellington concluded his routine with another bow. I have never seen anything like it. The twins beamed with pride, and Elena felt a rush of gratitude for Marcus's genuine appreciation of something that many people would have dismissed as foolish. Her grandmother's lessons in dignity and grace had extended to all members of their unusual family, and having those lessons respected rather than ridiculed meant more than she could express. As the days lengthened into their second week at the ranch, Elena began to relax in ways she hadn't even realized she'd forgotten how to do. The constant vigilance that had become second nature began to ease, replaced by a growing sense of security that came from Marcus's steady presence and the isolated safety of the ranch. The twins were thriving in ways that broke Elena's heart with relief. They slept through the night without nightmares, played with uninhibited joy, and began to show glimpses of the confident children they had been before fear had taught them to be cautious and quiet. Marcus noticed their transformation as well, often commenting on Sophia's increasing chatter during their morning barn chores, or Isabella's growing boldness in her interactions with the horses. They're healing, he observed to Elena one evening as they sat on his porch, watching the twins play an elaborate game of tag with Wellington in the yard. Children are resilient, but they need safety to remember how to be children. Elena nodded, wrapping her arms around her knees as she watched her daughter's carefree laughter. I was starting to think they'd forgotten how to play. We'd been moving so much, staying in places where they had to be quiet and careful, and she trailed off, unwilling to give voice to the full extent of what their lives had become. But Marcus seemed to understand without detailed explanations. They remember now, he said simply. That's what matters. The peaceful interlude might have continued indefinitely if not for the phone call that came on a Tuesday afternoon while Elena was hanging laundry, and the twins were teaching Wellington to navigate a new obstacle course they'd constructed near the barn. Marcus answered the phone in his kitchen, and Elena could hear his voice through the open window, though not his words. But something in his tone made her pause in her work, clothespins forgotten in her hand as she strained to listen. The conversation was brief, and when Marcus emerged from the house, his expression was carefully neutral in a way that immediately set Elena's nerves on edge. That was Sheriff Patterson from town, Marcus said without preamble. Someone's been asking questions about newcomers to the area. A man in an expensive car, showing photos. The clothespins fell from Elena's nerveless fingers, scattering across the ground as the familiar ice of fear flooded her veins. She had known this moment would come, had been preparing for it, even as she allowed herself to hope it might not. But knowing hadn't made her ready for the crushing weight of disappointment that settled over her like a suffocating blanket. We have to go, she said automatically, her mind already racing through the logistics of packing quickly and quietly. Tonight? Before? No, Marcus said firmly, his voice cutting through her panic. No more running, Elena. She stared at him, seeing determination in his eyes that matched her own desperation. "You don't understand. When he finds us, and he will find us, it won't just be me he hurts. Anyone who's helped us becomes a target. I won't put you in danger." Marcus stepped closer, his hands gentle but firm as they settled on her shoulders. "And I won't let you face this alone. Not anymore." Across the yard, the twins continued their game with Wellington, blissfully unaware that their brief respite from fear was about to end. Elena watched them, memorizing their laughter, storing up the image of their uninhibited joy against the dark days she knew were coming. "His name is Vincent Carruthers," she said quietly, the words scraping her throat like broken glass. "He's a federal prosecutor with connections in every major city between here and the Atlantic coast. He owns judges, police chiefs, politicians. When he wants something, he gets it." Marcus's hands tightened slightly on her shoulders, a gesture of support rather than restraint. "What does he want with you and the girls?" Elena closed her eyes. The weight of secrets she'd carried for months, threatening to crush her. But Marcus deserved the truth, especially if his kindness was about to make him a target. "He was my grandmother's neighbor in Austin," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Charming, sophisticated, recently widowed. He pursued Grammy relentlessly after his wife died, bringing flowers, taking her to dinner, playing the part of the grieving gentleman seeking companionship." She opened her eyes, meeting Marcus's steady gaze. "Grammy was lonely after raising me alone for so many years. Vincent was everything she thought she wanted: educated, cultured, financially secure. When he proposed, she accepted." The words came easier now, as if finally speaking them aloud was breaking the hold they'd had over her. The marriage was beautiful, expensive, perfect. Vincent spared no expense, making Grammy feel cherished and special. For 3 months, she was happier than I'd ever seen her. Marcus waited patiently as Elena gathered the strength to continue, his presence solid and reassuring even as she prepared to shatter his peaceful world with the truth of what she'd brought to his doorstep. Then Grammy started getting sick. Just little things at first. Headaches, nausea, fatigue. Vincent was so attentive, bringing her special teas, insisting she rest, taking over all her business affairs to spare her the stress. He convinced her to name him as her medical power of attorney and the executor of her will. The familiar rage began to build in Elena's chest, the anger that had sustained her through the darkest moments of the past year. She died 6 months after their wedding. The doctors said it was a rare neurological condition, aggressive and untreatable. Vincent was devastated, the perfect grieving widower. Marcus's eyes darkened with understanding, but he remained silent, letting her tell the story at her own pace. "Except Grammy's will left everything to me and the twins," Elena continued. "The house, the music school, her savings, all of it." Vincent was furious. He'd expected to inherit everything, had already made plans for selling the property and liquidating the business. She took a shaky breath, the most difficult part still ahead. "That's when I found Grammy's journal. She'd been documenting everything. The gradual onset of her symptoms, Vincent's increasing control over her medical care, her growing suspicions about the special teas he brought her every day. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that transformed a sad story of loss into something much darker. She knew," Elena whispered. By the end, she knew what he was doing to her, but she was too sick to fight it, too weak to protect herself, but she was still strong enough to protect us. Marcus's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. "What did you do with the journal?" "I copied everything and gave the original to a private investigator Grammy had secretly hired. But before I could do anything else, Vincent made his move. He filed papers claiming Grammy had been mentally incompetent when she changed her will, that I had manipulated a sick old woman for financial gain." The bitter laugh that escaped Elena's throat held no humor. He painted himself as the victim, the loving husband trying to honor his wife's true wishes. He had doctors testify about Grammy's condition, lawyers swear that she'd expressed different intentions about her estate. I fought it for months, spending every penny I had on legal fees. "But you won," Marcus said, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Elena shook her head. "The court ruled in Vincent's favor. Grammy's will was overturned, and everything went to him. But that wasn't enough. Vincent wanted to make sure I couldn't cause any more trouble. She paused, watching Sophia help Isabella guide Wellington through a particularly challenging part of their obstacle course. The twins were so focused on their play, so trusting in the safety of this place, that they hadn't noticed the adult conversation taking place across the yard. "He had me arrested," Elena continued quietly, "charged with elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy. He claimed I'd isolated Grammy from her friends, convinced her to change doctors, manipulated her finances. The private investigator I'd hired mysteriously disappeared, along with all the evidence we'd gathered." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her finish. "I spent 3 days in jail before my lawyer could get me released on bond." But Vincent wasn't done. He filed for emergency custody of the twins, claiming I was an unfit mother who had already demonstrated a willingness to abuse vulnerable family members. The memory of that day still had the power to steal Elena's breath. I came home to find social workers at Grammy's house, packing up the girls' belongings. Vincent was there, playing the concerned stepfather figure, explaining how he'd suspected all along that I wasn't stable but had hoped marriage to Grammy would help me find direction. She met Marcus's eyes, seeing her own rage reflected in his expression. That's when I grabbed the girls and ran. We've been moving ever since, staying ahead of the private investigators Vincent hired to track us down. Every time we started to feel safe somewhere, he'd find us. The weight of the confession left Elena feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified. She'd carried these secrets alone for so long that sharing them felt both liberating and dangerous. "The journal?" Marcus said after a long moment. "Do you still have copies?" Elena nodded. "Hidden where Vincent will never think to look, along with bank records showing the payments he made to the doctors who testified about Grammy's mental state, and communications between him and the lawyers who helped orchestrate the will challenge. Then you have evidence," Marcus said with quiet intensity. "Proof of what he did. Evidence that disappeared the first time I tried to use it," Elena reminded him. "Vincent has connections everywhere. Money, power, influence. He can make problems go away and create new ones for anyone who gets in his way." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of an approaching vehicle reached them across the quiet ranch. Elena's blood turned to ice as a black sedan appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as it traveled down the long dirt road that led to Marcus's property. "Get the girls," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a calm authority that cut through Elena's panic. "Take them to the cabin and lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." Elena was already moving, calling to Sophia and Isabella with forced cheerfulness, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Girls, let's go inside for some lemonade. Wellington, too." The twins looked up from their play, immediately sensing the tension in their mother's voice, despite her attempt to sound casual. They'd learned to read her moods with the survival instincts of children who'd lived with uncertainty for too long. "Is the bad man coming?" Sophia asked quietly, as Elena ushered them toward the cabin, Wellington trotting alongside with his bow tie slightly askew from his obstacle course performance. "I don't know, sweetheart," Elena answered honestly, unwilling to lie to children who'd already lost too much innocence. "But Mr. Marcus is going to make sure we're safe." As they reached the cabin, Elena looked back to see Marcus standing in his yard, feet planted wide, hands loose at his sides. He looked calm and ready, like a man accustomed to facing trouble head-on rather than running from it. The sight of his steady presence gave Elena a flicker of hope, even as the black sedan drew closer, carrying with it the end of their brief sanctuary and the return of the nightmare they'd been trying to escape. Inside the cabin, she gathered the twins close while Wellington positioned himself by the door, his intelligent eyes alert and watchful. Through the window, Elena could see the sedan pulling to a stop in front of Marcus's house, and her heart clenched with fear not just for herself and her daughters, but for the good man who was about to discover just how dangerous it could be to stand between Vincent Carruthers and something he wanted. The car door opened, and Elena's worst fears were confirmed as Vincent stepped out, looking exactly as she remembered. Tall, distinguished, expensively dressed, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having to face real consequences for his actions. But as he approached Marcus, Vincent's usual charm seemed to falter slightly. Marcus Hayes wasn't the type of man who could be easily intimidated or bought, and Elena found herself praying that Vincent's arrogance might finally have led him to underestimate an opponent. The two men faced each other across Marcus's yard, and Elena held her breath, knowing that whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine whether her daughters would ever again know the kind of safety and happiness they'd found at Cedar Creek Ranch. Vincent Carruthers stepped out of the black sedan with the practiced grace of a man accustomed to making impressive entrances. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his silver hair impeccably styled, and his smile carried the kind of warmth that had convinced a lonely widow to trust him with her life. But Marcus Hayes had spent enough years reading people to recognize predators, regardless of how well they dressed. "Mr. Hayes, I presume?" Vincent said, extending a manicured hand as he approached. "Vincent Carruthers. I believe you may be able to help me with a family matter." Marcus kept his hands at his sides, making no move to accept the offered handshake. "Private property, Mr. Carruthers. You're trespassing." Vincent's smile never wavered, though something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Of course, my apologies. I'm looking for my stepdaughters, you see. 2 little girls who were taken from their home by their unstable mother. I'm quite concerned for their welfare." "Don't know anything about missing children," Marcus replied evenly. "Now I suggest you get back in your car and leave." From her position at the cabin window, Elena watched the exchange with her heart in her throat. Vincent was playing his role perfectly, the concerned father figure, reasonable and worried, painting her as the villain in their story. She'd seen him use this same performance on judges, social workers, and police officers with devastating effectiveness. "Mr. Hayes," Vincent continued, his tone taking on a note of patient concern, "I understand your reluctance to get involved, but these children are in danger. Their mother has serious mental health issues, a history of financial crimes, and a tendency toward violence when cornered." Each lie rolled off Vincent's tongue with practiced ease, and Elena felt the familiar sick twist in her stomach that came from hearing her life rewritten by someone who specialized in making fiction sound like truth. Marcus's expression didn't change. "Like I said, haven't seen any children matching that description. Now you have 30 seconds to get off my property before I call the sheriff." Vincent's facade cracked slightly, irritation seeping through his polished exterior. "I don't think you understand who you're dealing with, Mr. Hayes. I'm a federal prosecutor with considerable influence in this state. I could make things very difficult for you if you're harboring fugitives. And I'm a man with a shotgun and legal right to defend my property," Marcus replied calmly. Your 30 seconds just became 20. The two men faced each other in the afternoon sunlight, and Elena could see the moment when Vincent realized that his usual tactics weren't going to work on Marcus Hayes. The rancher was immune to both charm and intimidation, standing his ground with the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced down more dangerous enemies than a corrupt prosecutor. "Check the barn," Vincent called over his shoulder to someone still in the sedan. Elena's blood ran cold as a second man emerged from the passenger side, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of professional alertness that screamed private security. Vincent had brought muscle to back up his threats. "You brought hired help to threaten a rancher on his own land?" Marcus asked, and for the first time, Elena heard something dangerous creep into his voice. That was a mistake. The security man had taken only 3 steps toward the barn when Sage and Timber appeared from behind the house, their hackles raised and low growls rumbling in their chests. The dogs flanked Marcus, their intelligent eyes fixed on the strangers with unwavering focus. "Call off your dogs," Vincent demanded, his composure finally beginning to crack as the border collies made it clear they viewed him and his companion as threats to their territory. "They're just being friendly," Marcus said mildly. "Border collies are naturally protective of their family." As if to emphasize the point, Sage let out a sharp bark that brought Marcus's horses to the fence line, their ears pricked forward and their eyes alert. 23 horses, each one rescued from abuse or neglect, each one bonded to the man who'd shown them kindness when the world had been cruel. Vincent looked around at the assembled animals, clearly reassessing the situation. His security man had stopped his advance toward the barn, apparently unwilling to navigate through a pack of protective dogs and curious horses without clearer instructions. "This is absurd," Vincent snapped, his carefully maintained facade crumbling entirely. "I have legal custody rights. Those children belong with me." "Do they now?" A new voice interrupted from behind Vincent's sedan. Sheriff Patterson emerged from his patrol car, which had arrived so quietly that no one had heard it over the sound of the confrontation. A tall man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a weathered face, he looked like exactly what he was, a lawman who'd seen enough to know trouble when it came calling. "Sheriff," Vincent said, immediately switching back to his charming mode. Perfect timing. "I was just explaining to Mr. Hayes that I need to retrieve my stepdaughters, who were illegally taken from their home by their mentally unstable mother." Sheriff Patterson nodded slowly, pulling a folded paper from his shirt pocket. "Funny thing about that, Mr. Carruthers, I got a very interesting fax this morning from a colleague in Texas. Seems there's been some new developments in your case." Elena's heart leaped with sudden hope. From inside the cabin, she could see Vincent's face go pale as the sheriff unfolded what appeared to be official documentation. "According to this," Sheriff Patterson continued, "the Texas State Attorney General's office has opened an investigation into allegations of judicial corruption, witness tampering, and murder in connection with the death of one Margaret Reeves. Your wife, I believe." Vincent's companion took a step backward, clearly recognizing the shift in dynamics. Whatever he was being paid, it apparently wasn't enough to stand between his employer and a murder investigation. "That's ridiculous," Vincent sputtered, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence. "Disgruntled family members making wild accusations. My wife died of natural causes, documented by multiple physicians. Multiple physicians who, according to this investigation, received substantial payments from offshore accounts linked to your business dealings," Sheriff Patterson said conversationally. Amazing what forensic accountants can dig up when they really put their minds to it. Marcus watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction, though he kept his attention split between Vincent and the security man, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. "There's also the matter of a private investigator named Tom Bradley who went missing right around the time your stepdaughter fled Texas," the sheriff continued. "Funny thing is, Mr. Bradley had a habit of making backup copies of all his investigations, hidden in places his clients wouldn't think to look." Elena's knees nearly gave out with relief. Tom Bradley, the investigator her grandmother had hired, hadn't disappeared completely. Somehow, somewhere, the evidence had survived Vincent's attempts to bury it. "I want to see documentation of these supposed custody rights," Sheriff Patterson said, his tone making it clear this was not a request. "Legal papers, court orders, anything that gives you authority over those children." Vincent's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Elena realized with growing amazement that for the first time since she'd known him, Vincent Carruthers was speechless. "Can't produce any paperwork?" the sheriff asked mildly. "That's interesting, because according to my information, all custody proceedings were suspended pending the criminal investigation, which means you have no legal right to those children whatsoever." The security man was already walking back toward the sedan, clearly having decided that his employment had just become significantly more complicated than advertised. Vincent called after him, but the man didn't look back as he got in the car and drove away, leaving his employer stranded. "Vincent Carruthers," Sheriff Patterson said formally, "you're under arrest as a fugitive from justice. The state of Texas has issued a warrant for your arrest on charges of murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice." The words Elena had dreamed of hearing for months rang across the quiet ranch like church bells. She pressed her face to the cabin window, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched Sheriff Patterson produce handcuffs and begin reading Vincent his rights. Vincent's legendary composure finally shattered completely. "This is a setup," he shouted, struggling against the handcuffs. "That woman is a criminal. She manipulated my wife, stole her money, poisoned her against me." "Save it for your lawyer," Sheriff Patterson said calmly, guiding Vincent toward the patrol car. "You're going to need a good one." As the sheriff's car disappeared down the dirt road with Vincent Carruthers in the back seat, Elena emerged from the cabin on shaking legs. Sophia and Isabella followed her, with Wellington trotting importantly behind them, his bow tie perfectly straight despite the afternoon's excitement. Marcus met them halfway across the yard, and without thinking, Elena threw herself into his arms. He caught her easily, holding her close while she sobbed against his chest. Tears of relief, grief, and overwhelming gratitude all mixed together. "It's over," Marcus murmured into her hair. "It's really over." The twins pressed close to their mother and the man who had become their protector, while Wellington sat at their feet like a dignified sentinel, his intelligent eyes surveying his domain with satisfaction. "How did you know to call the sheriff?" Elena asked when she could finally speak. Marcus smiled, his arm still around her. "Didn't call him. Tom Patterson's been keeping an eye on things. Since I mentioned we had visitors who might be running from trouble, he was already suspicious when Vincent showed up in town asking questions. But the investigation, the evidence, how? Your grandmother's private investigator was smarter than Vincent gave him credit for," Marcus explained. "Bradley didn't just make backup copies of his files. He sent them to law enforcement contacts in multiple states, with instructions that they be opened if anything happened to him." Elena stared at him in amazement. "You mean all this time while we were running?" "The wheels of justice were turning," Marcus finished. "Sometimes they turn slowly, but they do turn." As the sun began to set over Cedar Creek Ranch, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Elena looked around at the place that had become their sanctuary. The horses grazed peacefully in their pastures, the barn cats emerged for their evening prowl, and Sage and Timber resumed their patrol of the property, as if arresting corrupt prosecutors was just another part of their daily routine. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, her small hand slipping into Marcus's. Marcus knelt down to the twins' level, his expression serious but warm. "Now you get to decide where you want to call home. Your mama's going to inherit your great-grandmother's house in Texas, just like she was supposed to. You could go back there, start over, make new memories." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "But what about Wellington's house and Buttercup? And all the kitties?" Marcus's smile was gentle but tinged with sadness. "They'll all miss you terribly, but the most important thing is that you and your mama are safe and free to choose your own future." Elena watched her daughters process this information, seeing the confusion and conflict on their young faces. They'd found happiness and security here, had begun to heal from the trauma of their months on the run. But they'd also lost so much. Their great-grandmother, their home, their sense of stability and belonging. "Mama," Sophia said finally, "where do you want to live?" The question hung in the air as Elena looked around at the ranch that had become home in ways she'd never expected. The main house where she'd learned to laugh again, the barn where her daughters had rediscovered the joy of play, the pastures where they'd all found peace. "I want to live where we're wanted," she said finally, "where we're part of a family, not just guests or employees or people running from the past." Marcus stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "In that case," he said quietly, "I have a proposition for you." Elena's heart began to race as she recognized the look in his eyes, the same mixture of hope and vulnerability she'd seen the night they'd shared dinner as an almost family. "Cedar Creek Ranch needs a permanent manager," Marcus continued. "Someone who understands organization, appreciates hard work, and isn't afraid of challenges. The job comes with a house, full benefits, and the opportunity to help run a therapeutic riding program that changes lives." Sophia and Isabella looked between their mother and Marcus with growing excitement, understanding dawning on their faces. "It also comes with 2 assistant managers," Marcus added solemnly, "whose primary responsibilities would involve pig supervision, horse friendship coordination, and general ranch happiness maintenance." "And Wellington?" Isabella asked seriously. Marcus's expression was equally serious as he replied, "Wellington would be promoted to head of ranch dignity and protocol. It's a very important position that comes with its own house and unlimited access to bow tie adjustments." Elena laughed through her tears, seeing her future spreading out before her like the vast Montana sky, full of possibility, anchored by love, and blessed with the kind of family that chose each other, rather than being bound by blood or circumstance. "Mr. Hayes," she said formally, extending her hand, "I believe we have a deal." Marcus took her hand in both of his smile brighter than the setting sun. "Welcome home, Elena. All of you." As they walked toward the house together, Marcus and Elena, Sophia and Isabella, Wellington trotting behind with his bow tie catching the last rays of sunlight, the ranch settled into the peaceful rhythm of evening. But it was a different kind of peace now, warmer and fuller, alive with the sounds of a family that had found each other in the most unlikely of ways. Sometimes the best love stories begin with the most unexpected arrivals. Sometimes home isn't a place you return to, but a place you discover. And sometimes the most precious gifts come in the form of twin daughters, a pig in a bow tie, and a cowboy who understands that the best families are built on choice, kindness, and the courage to stand up for what matters most. Wellington settled onto his favorite cushion on the porch, surveying his domain with the satisfaction of a job well done. His bow tie was perfectly straight, his family was safe, and all was right with the world. In the distance, the evening star appeared in the darkening sky, bright with promise for all the tomorrows yet to come. 6 months later, the morning sun cast long shadows across Cedar Creek Ranch as Elena Hayes stood on the porch of what was now officially her home, watching her husband lead a group of visiting children toward the therapeutic riding arena. The gold band on her finger caught the light, still new enough to make her smile every time she noticed it. The wedding had been simple and perfect, taking place right here on the ranch with Sheriff Patterson officiating and half the town in attendance. Sophia and Isabella had served as flower girls, scattering rose petals, while Wellington followed behind them in a specially crafted bow tie made of white silk. The pig had taken his role as ring bearer seriously, carefully carrying the wedding bands in a small basket attached to a harness that Elena had designed herself. Their honeymoon had consisted of a long weekend in Helena, while Marcus's sister watched the twins and Wellington, but Elena couldn't imagine anywhere she'd rather return to than this place that had become the center of their universe. The therapeutic riding program had reopened with Elena as co-director, her organizational skills and natural empathy with troubled children making her an invaluable partner to Marcus. They'd expanded the program to include music therapy sessions, inspired by Elena's background with her grandmother's music school, and the calming effect that classical composition seemed to have on both horses and riders. Sophia and Isabella had become unofficial junior instructors, their natural way with the horses, and their understanding of what it meant to heal from trauma making them surprisingly effective helpers with the younger children who came to the ranch. Wellington had earned his own special role as a therapy animal, his calm presence and dignified demeanor providing comfort to children who found horses too intimidating initially. Mrs. Hayes called Jamie Morrison one of their regular participants, an 8-year-old boy who'd been terrified of large animals when he first arrived 3 months ago. Wellington's teaching Daisy how to bow again. Elena looked toward the small corral, where Wellington was indeed demonstrating his signature move to a cream-colored pony who seemed to be attempting her own version of the elegant gesture. The sight never failed to amuse visitors, though the ranch family had grown accustomed to Wellington's teaching methods. "He's very thorough in his instruction," Elena called back, earning a giggle from Jamie, who was now confident enough to brush the horses without supervision. The sound of laughter drew Elena's attention to the main arena, where Marcus was helping a teenage girl named Sarah adjust her position in the saddle. The girl had been coming to the ranch for 2 months, working through anxiety and depression following her parents' difficult divorce. Elena had seen the same haunted look in Sarah's eyes that she remembered from her own daughters during their darkest days. But today Sarah was smiling as she guided her horse through a series of gentle turns, her confidence growing with each successful maneuver. Marcus's patient guidance and the horse's steady temperament were working together to rebuild something that trauma had torn down. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer in Texas, where the legal resolution of her grandmother's estate was finally nearing completion. Vincent's arrest had unraveled his entire web of corruption, leading to the overturning of the fraudulent will and the restoration of Margaret Reeves's true intentions. The music school property, the house, and all of her grandmother's savings would soon be officially returned to Elena and the twins. They'd decided to sell the Texas property, using the proceeds to expand the ranch's therapeutic programs and establish a scholarship fund for children who couldn't afford the sessions. It felt like the perfect way to honor her grandmother's memory while building something meaningful for the future. "Mama, come see what Isabella taught Buttercup," Sophia called, racing across the yard with her twin close behind. Elena followed her daughters to the pasture where Marcus's gentlest mare stood patiently, while Isabella demonstrated what appeared to be a simplified version of Wellington's dancing routine. The horse was actually lifting her hooves in rhythm, swaying slightly as Isabella hummed a melody that Elena recognized as one of her grandmother's favorite pieces. "Grammy would have loved this," Elena murmured, watching her daughter's unconscious echo of the woman who had shaped so much of their understanding of grace and dignity. "She does love it," Isabella said matter-of-factly. She told me so in my dream last night. She said Wellington's been a very good teacher, and that she's proud of how we're taking care of everyone. Elena's throat tightened with emotion. Both twins had begun having what they called Grammy dreams shortly after settling permanently at the ranch, conversations with their great-grandmother that brought them comfort and seemed to help them process their grief. She also said to tell you that you picked the right cowboy, Sophia added with the solemnity of someone delivering an important message, and that she likes his horses very much. Before Elena could respond, the sound of approaching vehicles announced the arrival of the afternoon session participants. 3 cars pulled up the drive, carrying children and parents who had become like extended family over the past months. Marcus jogged over from the arena, his face showing the particular satisfaction that came from watching breakthrough moments in his students' progress. "How's my beautiful wife doing?" he asked, pulling Elena into his arms despite the audience of arriving families. "Perfect," Elena answered honestly, leaning into the solid warmth of his embrace. "Absolutely perfect." The afternoon session was one of their most successful yet, with each child showing measurable progress in both their riding skills and their emotional healing. Elena found herself thinking of her grandmother often during these sessions, remembering how Margaret Reeves had believed that broken things could heal each other when brought together with patience and love. As the last families departed and the evening chores began, Elena helped Marcus settle the horses for the night, while the twins collected eggs from the chickens they'd added to the ranch menagerie. Wellington supervised all activities from his position near the barn door, his evening bow tie a deep purple that complemented the sunset colors painting the Montana sky. "Penny for your thoughts," Marcus said, finding Elena standing quietly beside Buttercup's stall. "Just thinking about Grammy," Elena replied, accepting the warm comfort of his arms around her shoulders. About how she always said that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected beginnings. Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "She was a wise woman. Look at what grew from you showing up in my old wagon with 2 little girls and a pig in a bow tie." Elena laughed, remembering that surreal morning that had changed everything. "I was so scared that day, so sure that we'd never find anywhere safe to belong. And now?" She turned in his arms, looking around at the ranch that had become home, the children who'd found healing here, the husband who'd given them all a chance to start over. "Now I know that home isn't something you find. It's something you build, one day at a time, with people who choose to love you." The twins came running from the chicken coop, their basket full of fresh eggs, and their faces glowing, with the kind of carefree happiness that had once seemed impossible. Wellington trotted behind them, his dignity intact, despite having spent part of the afternoon teaching a reluctant rooster some basic manners. "Dinner planning committee meeting," Sophia announced importantly. "Wellington votes for pancakes." "Wellington always votes for pancakes," Isabella pointed out reasonably. "But tonight's pizza night, remember?" Elena smiled at their routine family debate, amazed by how normal and wonderful their lives had become. 6 months ago, the idea of her daughters arguing about dinner menus while a pig in a bow tie offered his opinions would have seemed like a fantasy too good to believe. "How about a compromise?" Marcus suggested. "Pizza tonight, and Wellington can help make pancakes tomorrow morning." The twins considered this proposal with the seriousness of experienced negotiators before nodding their approval. Wellington, perhaps understanding that his breakfast preferences had been acknowledged, executed a satisfied bow. As they walked toward the house together, Elena noticed new additions to their family portrait that hadn't been there that morning. A mother cat and 3 tiny kittens had taken up residence on the porch, apparently deciding that the Hayes household was the sort of place where strays were welcome. "Looks like we have more visitors," Marcus observed with amusement. "Can we name them?" Sophia asked, already kneeling beside the protective mother cat. "And can they stay, please?" Elena looked at her husband, seeing her own answer reflected in his warm smile. This ranch had become a sanctuary for all kinds of lost souls, seeking safety and love. What were a few more? "I think that can be arranged," Elena said, watching Isabella gently stroke one of the tiny kittens, while Wellington watched approvingly. "Wellington will need to interview them first, make sure they understand proper household protocol." As if responding to his cue, Wellington approached the cat family with dignified curiosity, his bow tie perfectly straight as he conducted what appeared to be a formal inspection. The mother cat regarded him with the respect due to an established household authority, and Elena could swear she saw Wellington nod his approval. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table with pizza boxes open and the twins chattering about their day, Elena felt the deep contentment that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. Marcus caught her eye across the table, his smile telling her he felt the same profound gratitude for the unexpected family they'd created together. After dinner, they gathered on the porch as they did every evening, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. The twins curled up on either side of Marcus, listening as he pointed out constellations and told stories about the ranch's history. Wellington had claimed his favorite cushion, while the new cat family had arranged themselves nearby, apparently understanding that this was the evening gathering spot. "Tell us about the first day again, Papa Marcus," Isabella requested, using the name she'd chosen for him after the adoption papers were finalized. Marcus smiled, beginning the story that had become family legend. "Well, it was a morning just like any other, until Sage and Timber started barking at something by the front gate." Elena listened to her husband's gentle voice weaving the tale of their unlikely beginning, transforming what had been a desperate flight from danger into a story of hope and new beginnings. The girls knew every detail by heart, but they never tired of hearing how their family had come to be. As Marcus reached the part about Wellington's first bow, the pigs seemed to recognize his cue and performed the gesture that had charmed them all that first day. The twins giggled, the cats purred, and Elena felt her heart overflow with love for this extraordinary life they'd built together. Later, after the twins were tucked into their beds, and Wellington had settled into his nighttime position guarding their doorway, Elena and Marcus sat together on their porch swing, wrapped in the peaceful silence of their ranch. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked softly, his arm tightening around her shoulders. Elena considered the question seriously, thinking of the life she might have lived if Vincent's corruption hadn't been exposed. If she'd never found the courage to trust the kindness of a stranger. If she'd kept running instead of choosing to stay and fight for something better. "Only one," she said finally. "I wish Grammy could have met you. She would have loved seeing what we've built here." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "I think she does see it. Every time Wellington bows. Every time the twins show kindness to a frightened animal. Every time you help a child find their confidence again. She's here in all the good things you learned from her." As if responding to their conversation, Wellington appeared around the corner of the house, making his final patrol of the evening. His bow tie was slightly crooked from his busy day, but his dignified bearing was as perfect as ever. He approached the porch swing and executed a formal goodnight bow before retiring to his own small house beside the barn. Elena laughed softly, never ceasing to be amazed by the pig's impeccable manners and apparent understanding of family rituals. "He really is remarkable." "They all are," Marcus said, pulling her closer. "Every member of this crazy, wonderful family we've put together." As they sat together under the star-filled sky, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that terrifying morning when she'd awakened in a stranger's wagon with nothing but her daughters and a pig in a bow tie, to this moment of perfect contentment surrounded by love and security. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most desperate circumstances. Sometimes home finds you when you least expect it. And sometimes the greatest gift you can receive is the chance to start over with people who see not what you've lost, but what you have to offer. Wellington's soft grunt drifted across the yard from his house, a contented sound that seemed to express what they were all feeling. They were home, they were safe, and they were loved. And tomorrow would bring new opportunities to extend that same sanctuary to other lost souls who might need a place to heal and grow. Elena closed her eyes and smiled, knowing that her grandmother would be proud of the life they'd built and the legacy of love they were creating together at Cedar Creek Ranch. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.